Well, welcome to CMDA Matters, and I'm your host, Dr. Mike Chupp, the CEO of CMDA. You know, one of the top reasons our members tell us that they support CMDA is because of our work on campuses all across the United States. Actually, 319 campuses is where we have ministry. We're leading the next generation of healthcare professionals so their careers can fully embrace and reflect the love of Christ. Well, like me, you may have become a CMDA member when you were a student. In this edition of CMDA Matters, you're going to hear from one of our student leaders, Mr. Zach Meade, whose life has been on a journey to become a physician innovator and what that means to Zach. But before we talk to Zach, I wanted to mention a couple of things. You've been hearing me talk each week about our national convention, April 16th to 19th at the Northern Kentucky Convention Center in Covington, Kentucky, just across the river from downtown Cincinnati. One of the activities that happens at the convention is the VIE poster session, where a number of students, residents, fellows, and faculty showcase their research projects. If this is the first time that you've heard about the VIE poster session, those letters VIE stand for vignettes, initiatives, innovations, and education. There actually is no submission fee for these research projects, but the deadline is coming up quickly, and it's February the 2nd. If you'd like to find out more, go to cmda.org/VIE to find out about how you might participate. We're also able this year to provide scholarships for first-time students to attend the National Convention. If you know a student who would like to attend, have them go online to cmda.org/PG Scholarship, and fill out an application. If you're interested in helping us provide scholarships for students, just contact our campus and community ministry by emailing ccm@cmda.org, ccm@cmda.org. Well, I'm calling our podcast today a crossover podcast because our Vice President for Campus and Community Ministry, Reverend Bill Reichart, joined me for this particular interview. Bill actually launched his own podcast, which he calls the Student Pulse Podcast, a couple of years ago with monthly news and interviews that students can subscribe to, and it's specifically geared toward the issues facing students in healthcare. Bill met Zach Meade when he was speaking at the Carle, Illinois College of Medicine last fall, and Carle happens to be the first medical school in the United States with an additional strong focus on engineering and technology development. Bill was so impressed with Zach and his classmate Dora because not only were they pioneers in the very first medical school class at Carle, but they also felt it important to launch a new CMDA student group in their first year at Carle. Well, I've kept you waiting long enough. Let's get right to that interview that both Bill Reichart and I did with second-year medical student Mr. Zach Meade. Welcome, Zachary Meade, to CMDA Matters and combined with the Student Pulse podcast with Bill Reichart. Welcome to the program today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Well, I see that you're a second-year medical student with a program that's designed to produce future physician innovators. And in fact, you're sort of the poster student for their program. How did you end up being the poster student for a brand new medical school?
I mean, at the end of the day, it's all by truly God's glory. I started off wanting to do engineering, and the Lord had a different idea for me, and that was medicine. But this school offered the opportunity to do both. So it just really worked out with my goals and dreams.
Bill, you met Zach not too long ago, and tell us about the context and what you saw about Zach as one of our CMDA leaders.
Yeah, I had a chance to visit the Midwest with Alan Harmer, our Midwest Regional Director, and one of our first stops was at Carle, Illinois College of Medicine. And I didn't really know much about the school, and I met Zach and the student leaders, and just learning about what you all are doing was just fascinating. Well, first of all, let me just begin to say what an incredible leadership team. You all have only been at this for a little over a year as a new student chapter with CMDA, but I just picked up a great depth of maturity and just a real spiritual sensitivity. Tell us a little bit about this school. This school is about integrating engineering directly into medicine, and most of the students there have an engineering background, don't they, Zach?
Yes, sir. So University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has a great engineering college. They've done that very well. They actually were I think the foundation for the MRI. So they have this long history of innovation in engineering, but they wanted to do more. Their idea was to partner with the local Carle hospital system and to combine what they do best, which is engineering, and what Carle Medical System does really well, which is healthcare, and look at the future of healthcare, which was physicians who not only treat patients, but on a larger scale can create and improve processes, systems, devices, and so on and so forth.
Well, physicians who get involved in innovation, they're not a dime a dozen. Tell us about how the curriculum, the classwork in a medical school like Carle, how is it different from a traditional medical school?
So I'd be lying if I said it was any easier. You have more of a burden to do a little more, because in addition to anatomy lab, in addition to lectures, and we're actually kind of a PBL blended, so we have our PBL cases. We also have engineering labs every week. These engineering labs could be anything from taking a pulse ox, taking it apart, looking at it, and then designing a plan to improve that technology. Or it could be, just last week, we did image processing. So we took breast cancer slides, and we took those pictures with our phone using a microscope on the phone, and we wrote some image processing to determine if that was cancer or if that was normal. So it's every organ system. They're integrating different ways of technology that enhance patient, quality of life, patient outcomes, and everything else.
So is there actually more coursework than the average traditional medical school, or there's some things taken away so that you can add the engineering innovation component?
They definitely don't take anything away. We're a fully accredited medical school. We're getting our MD, and we're doing everything else that every other medical school has to do. So yeah, they are adding in more, which is something we all knew coming into it. Once we get into our clerkships, our rotations, we have these, they call them engineering grand rounds. So let's say I'm on my surgery rotation, and every Friday I have to pitch an idea to my preceptors about, this is something I saw in surgery this week, and this is how I think this process or this device could be improved. And all the other students kind of pitch their ideas. And then at the end of our rotation, we'll pick one big idea and kind of write a proposal and a plan. And at the end of our fourth year, we have to actually follow one of those ideas that we pitched. We have to follow it through. We have to create the product. And then there's another aspect of data science. But we also have to collect data, if that's population health kind of style project, or if it's related to maybe we created a new surgery device and we want to see how effective it is, if it's kind of related to that.
I would think that technology and tools, hardware, innovation, I think of orthopedic surgery, I think of neurosurgery, all kinds of surgical subspecialties. Are you drawn to a surgical subspecialty as well as your classmates?
I am personally. I'm just a very hands-on guy. I think that came from kind of my upbringing and my time in the military, just wanting to be hands-on and that kind of instant gratification of being able to help people. But a lot of our classmates, some want to do cardiology, some want to do primary care. I mean, it's really a breadth of students. They really did a great job recruiting a diverse class.
Zach, I'm listening to your schedule, and I'm tired just hearing about everything you do. It's amazing the amount of work and effort. But what I'm also amazed by is, in addition to all of this, that you and a bunch of students felt burdened to start a CMDA chapter. And first of all, let's just back up and ask, how did you hear about CMDA, and what led to you all coming together to create an expression of CMDA there at your med school?
Oh, I got to give the credit to a co-leader, vice president of the chapter, Dora, great classmate. She actually told me about CMDA. She was kind of poking around and talking to everyone and kind of getting the feel for, what kind of Christian presence we had in this class, because the rumor is in higher ed, there's not a whole lot of Christians, and sometimes you even get professors and things that are antagonistic toward it. So, to our surprise, about a third of our class, were practicing Christians. And then I actually had a gentleman from the veterinary school that we have on campus reached out to me that connected me with a local faculty representative, John Kim, who had been doing a CMDA with the old medical school at UIUC. And that kind of, knowing that there was a faculty member that was interested in leading us, and knowing that we had a great core of classmates that would be interested in participating in Bible studies and outreach and everything, it was kind of a no-brainer that this is kind of where I felt called to serve.
I remember you also telling me while I was there that you have the support of a lot of, I say a lot, I mean several Christian faculty that are very supportive. The school is very supportive of this, but also the Kims, they do something very special. Maybe I'd like for you to just speak into, this is a couple off campus that is opening up their homes. Explain a little bit of how they minister to you as a medical student.
So Dr. John and Elizabeth Kim, they've kind of had a heart for medical students for many years. And once a month we meet at their house. They serve a lovely meal. And we just finished this study in Daniel, how to living in the cadaver lab without smelling like a cadaver.
Living in the lab without smelling like a cadaver. That's a series on Daniel that we offer. Yes.
So, they were ministering to us, in a physical aspect by giving us a mental break away from school, food, and of course, spiritual nourishment. And they've just been amazing. It's really been a blessing to have them. And like you said, there are 4 or 5 other physicians around our campus that come to these meetings every month and are really supportive and active.
Well, Zach, in your background, you served our country in the Army, and I think your title was Explosive Ordnance Disposal Technician. I guess you took care of bombs. Is that right?
Yeah, that's not how I wanted it to go at first. I went to the recruiter's office and I said, hey, I want to be a chaplain. I think that's my calling. And they said, well, you have to have a master's degree in theology and you have to be sponsored by a denomination. I'm like, oh, I'm in high school. I can't do that. So, I really got, a calling from the Lord. You don't have to be a pastor to fulfill his calling for our lives, and to share the gospel. So, that led me to the bomb squad. EOD is what we call it. We could save lives in a physical way, but still save them in a spiritual way as well.
And then after that experience, I guess, you got familiar with soldiers who had maybe lost from IEDs, had lost limbs, and got involved being an EMT. And then also at the University of Nebraska, we're dealing with ways to improve prosthetics. Or tell us about that stage.
Yeah, so after my time in the Army, I transitioned to the reserves and I started to pursue education full time. I was a volunteer firefighter and EMT, and that was my first exposure to healthcare. I really was loving the EMT stuff, but I was also learning this engineering. At the same time, there was this great research project going on at the University of Nebraska, the Biomechanics Research Building. They have an amazing grants and a program, and one that I was able to be a part of was a project that was trying to improve prosthetics. And of course, with my background, as you mentioned, so many of the people I know have injuries, amputations, so on and so forth. So I felt that was a great way to combine medicine and engineering, was to help these amputees and to help improve that technology. And that's something that really ignited my passion and pointed me toward what would eventually be the Carle, Illinois College of Medicine.
Well, you're sharing with 2 different listening audiences. CMDA matters for a broad audience, including a number of faculty and graduates, as well as a student audience. I just wanted to ask you, what would you say to a group of students listening in right now in terms of how you'd encourage them to get engaged in CMDA chapters wherever they are? We're on over Bill 319.
319 and counting, yes.
So what would you have to say to the students who are listening out there in terms of how it helps you in terms of community, in terms of encouragement, avoiding loneliness, and so forth? And then the second audience would be to faculty, graduates out there, and why you think they should invest, even maybe those who are approaching retirement and beyond, and why should they invest in students today?
First of all, to the students out there listening, the medical students or soon-to-be medical students, it's so hard to get into medical school. And then once you get there, it doesn't get any easier. And this isn't a battle that you can do on your own. Just like we see in the scriptures, God has created, has given his creation a purpose. And part of that is not being alone. You can't do this alone. And medical school is no different. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of the harder things you're going to do, at least until you get to residency, I hear, and then so on. But you need that community, and that's exactly what the CMDA has done. It has like-minded individuals that you can count on them, you can be open and vulnerable with them, and it makes the process of going through medical school so much easier, because you always have this group of people that you can talk to if you need to, that you can study with, you can get lunch with, and it's probably one of my favorite aspects of the whole process so far. And to the physicians out there, I would encourage you to get involved, because every one of you were in this spot at one point in time, and it may be too far removed to remember how difficult we thought it was, but that's where some of these students are. They think this is the hardest thing they've done. They're struggling with it. Depression and burnout, I'm sure we are burnt out of hearing those terms, but they're very real. And, being a Christian doesn't make you immune to those. So I encourage you to get invested with the local chapter, the local medical schools near you, and support them in any way. If you can't open your own homes up to them, maybe go to the campus and have a meeting with them. Just shepherd them and tell them that there's more to look forward to.
I think one of the most powerful things that I've seen is when physicians come on campus and they share their stories. And it's as simple as that oftentimes. They can share the good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah, I think authenticity, would you not agree, Bill? And Zach, speak into this for us. What I've heard is that what millennials and Zs want is authenticity and help with areas of failure, difficulty that people have faced. And that just makes it more real and impactful. What do you think about that?
Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of times, or at least in my experience growing up, it wasn't okay to fail. It wasn't okay to be weak. You couldn't cry. But seeing these physicians that have gone there and done that, like actually Dr. Robert Cranston, I actually just saw you guys. He's a speaker of yours, someone that you guys sponsor. We're blessed enough to have him here at this medical school and at our local hospital. And he has been very real with us and sharing very personal details that's just been so encouraging and inspiring. And I really look up to him for that.
Well, I have to say, I'm encouraged to hear your story. And I'm reminded, too, as we talked a little over a month ago, that you're leaving a legacy behind, too, that you've got a unique opportunity now. You're the first class, but now you've got some emerging student leaders that you're training, you're grooming, that are going to take your spot. I'm excited for the future of Carle and what God is doing there. And I just want to personally thank you for your time and investment. It's I often say to students, you may not have a lot of money. Maybe you're going into a negative cash flow every day, but you have time, and you're tithing your time, and you're giving yourself away. So thank you, Zach, for the investment you've made, and I believe the legacy you're going to be leaving behind.
Boy, amen to that, Bill. And Zach, just as the Chief Exhortation Officer here at CMDA these days, I want to encourage you. We talk about the black hole that happens after the second year of medical school and how med students seem to go down and don't come back out for years. But wow, what a culture! You're taking lead, and so you and Dora, that you guys can actually set the tone for the future, and that students who are third year, fourth year can actually remain engaged in this wonderful community called CMDA.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me, and we're really excited to see, where this chapter can go.
Well, I hope we'll get you out to the national convention, maybe someday a poster session that you could join with some of the other students.
Yeah, we can see some of that innovation.
Yeah,
we're expecting a lot from the first engineering medical school class coming out of Carle. God bless you, Zach.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Well, several of us in the CMDA office have interacted with Zach, and all of us have come away from that conversation encouraged and excited about the next generation of healthcare professionals. There are hundreds and maybe even thousands of students just like Zach across the United States on one of the 319 campuses where CMDA has ministry. We just completed our winter CMDA board meeting in Houston this past weekend, and I sat at a dinner table on Saturday evening with a medical student from Baylor University named Seth. And Seth was sharing with me how really vital it had been for him in his first year of medical school to interact with Christian faculty. You know, that MD Anderson campus is the largest medical center in the United States. And that CMDA group in Houston, it's only 2 years old. They are growing and have been blessed and have amazing ministry, but still, they're just a little platoon, a little band of Christ followers there in healthcare. And Seth told me that his faith had been somewhat deconstructed during his undergrad years. And because of his interaction with Christian faculty and other Christian students, that his faith had been strengthened, and now he was using the bus ride 45 minutes to get to campus each day to spend his quality time with his Heavenly Father. And that came because of the influence of the CMDA student group there at Baylor. CMDA matters a great deal to these students at a very critical time in their professional training. Well, I want to shift gears. I want to highlight, as I conclude this podcast, one of our graduate members who is also a leader within our Women Physicians in Christ ministry. Her name is Dr. Regina Frost, and she practices in Detroit. She recently submitted an op-ed commentary published in a national news outlet. Dr. Frost has joined CMDA in our lawsuit to intervene and protect a very supportive proposal from May 2019 by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services on right of healthcare conscience. In her op-ed in the Federalist, Dr. Frost writes, "These federal conscience protections, known as the Conscience Rule, merely allow the government to enforce laws that have been on the books with bipartisan support for decades. These laws, like the Weldon Amendment and the Coates-Snow Amendment, simply prevent tax dollars from being used to force pro-life doctors like me from performing abortions." You know, Regina's op-ed has been discussed on the podcast by the Reverend Al Mohler called The Briefing, and she's been quoted in numerous articles within the pro-life community. I am so inspired by Dr. Frost and her courageous stand. Rest assured, each of you, that CMDA will continue to fight in federal court to protect your right to exercise faith-based, conscience-driven decisions in healthcare. Well, as we close this edition of CMDA Matters, I really want to ask you, please join us in praying for victory in this important case, which we have appealed because we lost the first round. We've appealed with Beckett Law to the next level for this conscience rule to be able to take effect in the future. My interview with Zach Meade on engineering and technology merging with medicine reminded me how excited my own co-workers and the national church was at Tenwek Hospital in Kenya when we installed and commissioned our very first CT scanner at Tenwek in 2011. Community leaders, church leaders, government officials all showed up and sang our praises at Tenwek for having a functional high-tech tool in Bomet County, Kenya. But honestly, on the dais that day, God's Spirit gave me a message to share with the hundreds who had gathered to celebrate a marvel of technology that was now available in rural Africa to help us better treat our patients at Tenwek Hospital. I want to leave each one of you with that message I gave them today. The greatest asset that we have in our healing work with patients is not any technological marvel like a CT scanner, computed tomography. Our greatest asset is that we have been empowered with Christ's touch. CT, Christ's touch. The next time you order a CT scan, I want you to remember that important truth. We not only have the mind of Christ, we can be His hands with His touch. Well, this has been CMDA Matters. So until next week, may God give you many opportunities to share His loving touch with patients and families and your coworkers. God bless you today.
This podcast has been a production of the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. The opinions expressed by guests on this podcast are not necessarily endorsed by the Christian Medical and Dental Associations. CMDA is a nonpartisan organization that does not endorse political parties or candidates for public office. The views expressed on this podcast reflect judgments regarding principles and values held by CMDA and its members and are not intended to imply endorsement of any political party or candidate.